The moonrakers loomed against the inky void of space, its sleek black hull punctuated by jagged, crystalline spires that seemed to drink in starlight. James Kane, Earth's senior diplomat to extraterrestrial powers, stepped off the docking ramp of the human envoy's ship with practiced composure. His tailored diplomatic suit, starkly simple compared to the elaborate robes of the Kokar welcoming party, seemed almost defiant. Kane's arrival was met with a procession of 6 towering Kokar warriors, their insectal limbs glistening in the artificial light of the docking bay. High Arbiter Rotapani emerged from their midst, his segmented carapace radiating a faint, iridescent shimmer. His multiple eyes blinked in unsettling synchronization as he observed Kane. A fragile creature to represent a fragile world, Rotapani hissed, his voice a deep hum that resonated in the metal walls. Kane offered a polite bow, masking the irritation bubbling beneath his diplomatic facade. Earth may appear fragile, High Arbiter, but appearances can be deceptive. I appreciate your invitation to this discussion. Rotapani tilted his elongated head, his mandibles clicking in what might have been amusement. We shall see, human. Come, your words will be weighed in the chamber of truth. The chamber was a cavernous space of cold obsidian and pulsing blue light. Kane took his place at a gleaming table opposite Rotapani, surrounded by other Kokar dignitaries who exuded an air of superiority. The discussion began, and it was immediately clear the so-called invitation was a prelude to coercion. The Kokar Empire has watched your kind, Rotapani began, his tone almost fatherly. Your species crawls to the stars like ants spilling from a broken nest. We offer order, protection, submit to our governance, and your people will thrive under our guidance. Kane leaned forward, folding his hands with deliberate calm. And if we choose not to submit? Rotapani's mandibles widened in what Kane recognized as a Kokar grin. Resistance would be unwise. Your military capabilities are quaint. Your biology is brittle. We offer a path of survival. Anything else courts annihilation. The room fell silent as Kane held Rotapani's gaze. High Arbiter, humanity values its sovereignty above all else. We've faced extinction before, war, famine, even the destruction of our own planet's ecosystems. Yet we endure. We adapt. You'll find that we don't surrender easily. Murmurs of disapproval rippled through the Kokar dignitaries. Rotapani's eyes narrowed, a curious blend of courage and foolishness. Perhaps you misunderstand your position here. Before Kane could respond, a guard approached Rotapani, whispering in a language too guttural for Kane to decipher. The High Arbiter's mandibles clicked irritably. Enough words. If you will not bend willingly, we shall test your limits another way. He gestured sharply, and 2 guards seized Kane by the arms. Is this your idea of diplomacy? Kane asked, his voice calm but cutting. Diplomacy, Rotapani replied, is a courtesy extended to equals. You are here to learn your place. Kane was dragged from the chamber and into a labyrinth of sterile corridors. He kept his breathing steady, even as the cold grip of fear coiled in his chest. They tossed him into a cell, a small, dark space illuminated by a single strip of faint light. The walls seemed to hum with an unsettling energy, and the air was thick, almost suffocating. Alone at last, Kane sank onto the metallic bench, his mind racing. The mission had been precarious from the start, but Earth's leaders had deemed it necessary. Humanity's survival hung in the balance, and Kane had accepted the risk. He reached into his jacket and retrieved a small vial, its contents shimmering like liquid starlight. The experimental serum, Earth's last-ditch contingency plan, felt heavy in his hand. Only if there's no other way, he muttered to himself, recalling the words of the scientist who had handed it to him. It'll change you, Kane. Maybe forever. Hours passed, or perhaps days. It was impossible to tell in the featureless cell. Kane's strength ebbed in the oppressive atmosphere. His senses dulled. Yet, amid the fatigue, a strange sensation began to stir. His ears picked up faint vibrations in the walls, sounds too subtle for human hearing. His skin prickled, hypersensitive to the faintest draft. And then there was the hunger. It gnawed at him, deep and primal, unlike anything he'd ever experienced. He clenched his fists, trying to suppress the rising unease. The cell door slid open without warning, and a Kokar guard entered, his towering frame casting a long shadow across the room. Kane looked up, his eyes sharper now, his instincts coiled like a predator's. "You're to be moved," the guard growled. Kane didn't respond, but as he stood, something deep within him awakened, a flicker of power he didn't yet understand. The guard stepped closer, and for the first time, Kane felt a faint smile curve his lips. Something was about to change. The hunger surged as Kane followed the towering Kokar guard down the dimly lit corridor. His limbs felt heavier than they should, yet his senses buzzed with a strange new sharpness. The serum coursing through his veins had begun to awaken something inside him, something primal and alien. The Kokar led him to an interrogation chamber, stark and clinical, with walls that pulsed faintly like a living organism. Kane's mind was focused, assessing every detail. The guard's gate, the positioning of the surveillance drones, the faint hum of a force field generator hidden behind the ceiling panels. His instincts sharpened by the serum. He felt less like a diplomat and more like a predator stalking prey. "Sit," the guard barked, gesturing to a chair bolted to the floor. Kane complied, masking his growing strength with a facade of weariness. High Arbiter Rotapani entered moments later, flanked by 2 more guards. His iridescent carapace glimmered menacingly under the chamber's bluish light. He approached Kane with an air of superiority, his segmented limbs clicking with deliberate precision. "You've caused quite a stir among my council, human," Rotapani began, his voice dripping with condescension. "For a species so insignificant, you display an amusing level of defiance. Tell me, what drives your insolence? Hope or ignorance?" Kane leaned back, meeting Rotapani's gaze with a calm intensity. "Neither," he replied. "It's conviction. Something you wouldn't understand." Rotapani chuckled, a hollow, resonant sound. "Conviction is meaningless without power. And you, James Kane, have none." As Rotapani turned to his guards, a wave of heat rushed through Kane's body. His vision flickered, colors sharpening to unnatural clarity. He could see the faint pulsation of the Kokar guards' veins beneath their exoskeletons, hear the subtle whirring of their breathing apparatuses. His muscles tense, his senses alive with a ferocity he barely recognized. The serum's effects had fully taken hold. Kane felt the hunger gnawing again, but this time it came with a purpose. When one of the guards moved closer, reaching to shackle his wrists, Kane acted instinctively. In a blur of movement he lunged, his strength far beyond what any human, or Kokar, could anticipate. His hands clamped onto the guard's forearms with crushing force. The guard screeched in surprise, but Kane's newfound power was overwhelming. With a sharp twist, he threw the alien into the opposite wall, its carapace cracking on impact. The room erupted into chaos. The second guard charged, raising a pulsating energy baton, but Kane ducked with inhuman agility, his movements fluid and precise. He struck back with a feral grace, his fingers, now tipped with unervingly sharp nails, tearing through the guard's armor. Rotapani stumbled backward, his mandibles twitching in shock. "What are you?" he hissed, his voice tinged with fear for the first time. Kane turned to him, his eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural crimson hue. "The product of your arrogance," he growled, his voice resonant and unervingly calm. Before Rotapani could react, Kane was upon him. He gripped the High Arbiter by his thorax, hoisting the alien effortlessly into the air. Rotapani thrashed, but Kane's strength was absolute. "You underestimated humanity," Kane said, his voice cold. "That was your first mistake. Your second was assuming I came here unprepared." He hurled Rotapani against the control panel, sparks flying as the impact disabled several systems. The lights flickered and an alarm blared, its shrill tone reverberating through the chamber. Kane turned toward the exit as reinforcements arrived. Kokar soldiers poured in, their weapons trained on him. For a moment he hesitated, The serum's power was intoxicating, its effects amplifying his aggression and instincts, but somewhere deep within, a sliver of his humanity remained. He launched himself at the soldiers, moving faster than their eyes could track. In the chaos that followed, Kane's body moved like a force of nature, disarming, incapacitating, and evading with terrifying precision. His strength was matched only by his calculated control, each strike designed to incapacitate rather than kill. As the last soldier fell, Kane turned back to Rotapani, who lay slumped against the sparking control panel, his carapace cracked and his breathing labored. "This is far from over," Kane said, his voice low and threatening. "You wanted to see what humanity is capable of? Consider this a demonstration." He strode out of the room, his mind racing with plans. The Moonrakers was vast and heavily fortified, but its greatest strength had become its weakness. Its arrogance, much like Rotapani's, had left it vulnerable to something it could not anticipate, the resilience of a human pushed to the brink. As he disappeared into the labyrinth of corridors, Kane felt the hunger stir once more, stronger this time. He clenched his fists, forcing it down, but he knew it was only a matter of time before the serum's effects demanded a greater price. Still, he couldn't afford to stop. Humanity's survival depended on him now. Kane moved through the shadowed corridors of the Moonrakers, his senses sharper than ever. Every hum of machinery, every faint footstep echoed in his ears like a symphony of survival. His transformation was complete now. Humanity's last-ditch serum had not only saved him, but turned him into something terrifyingly effective. Yet with every passing moment, the hunger clawed deeper, threatening to consume him. He couldn't allow it. Not yet. Ahead, a squad of Kokhar soldiers rounded the corner, their glowing rifles casting an eerie blue light on the walls. Kane crouched, his muscles coiled like a spring. With a surge of speed, he launched himself into their midst. The first soldier barely had time to scream before Kane disarmed him, the rifle crumpling in his hands like paper. The others fired wildly, but Kane weaved between the shots, his movements too quick for their insectal reflexes to track. Within moments, the soldiers lay sprawled across the corridor, unconscious but alive. Kane stood over them, chest heaving. The hunger surged again, whispering for more, but he shoved it down, forcing himself to focus. The command center wasn't far. He could feel it. The faint vibrations of energy pulsing through the ship converged in one place. That was where he needed to be. As he approached the command center, alarms blared throughout the ship, their shrill tones reverberating off the walls. Rotapani must have sent a warning, but Kane had expected no less. He reached a massive set of double doors, the entrance to the heart of the Moonrakers. They glowed with a protective field, but Kane smiled faintly. "Let's see how your tech holds up," he muttered. Gripping the edge of the door, he focused his strength. His muscles strained, his enhanced senses honing in on the weakest points of the energy field. With a guttural roar, he tore the doors from their hinges, the protective barriers shattering like glass. Inside, the command center was a hive of activity. Kokhar officers scrambled to their stations, their mandibles clicking in panic as Kane stepped into the room. At the far end, High Arbiter Rotapani stood, his injured carapace gleaming under the harsh light. "You've gone far enough, human," Rotapani growled, his voice trembling with suppressed rage. Kane strode forward, his crimson-tinged eyes locked on the High Arbiter. "Not quite. I'm just getting started." Rotapani raised an arm, and the room filled with the whine of charging plasma rifles. Kane froze, calculating his options. He could fight, but the sheer number of weapons trained on him meant he wouldn't emerge unscathed. Then inspiration struck. "You've already lost," Kane said, his voice calm but laced with menace. "Do you know why?" Rotapani hesitated, his mandibles twitching. "Enlighten me, human." Kane gestured around the room. "Because I'm standing here. Your invincible empire, your unstoppable technology, all of it, and yet one human has torn through your ship, disabled your systems, and faced your armies. You call us fragile, but you've seen what we're capable of. Imagine what the rest of us can do. The Kokar officers glanced at one another, uncertainty rippling through their ranks. Kane pressed on. Your arrogance blinds you, he continued, his voice rising. You think you've conquered the galaxy, but you've never faced a species like ours. We don't break. We don't stop. And when you push us to the edge, we adapt. Rotapani snarled, raising a clawed hand to silence his officers. Empty words. Your kind is nothing more than an infestation. Kane smirked. Then you should be very afraid of what happens when the infestation learns to bite back. With that, he moved faster than the Kokar could react. He seized Rotapani by the thorax, lifting the High Arbiter into the air. The soldiers hesitated, unsure whether to fire and risk hitting their leader. Call them off, Kane demanded, his voice low and deadly. For a moment, Rotapani struggled, his many eyes flicking toward his officers. Then, slowly, he raised a hand. The soldiers lowered their weapons, their mandibles clicking in defeat. Kane set Rotapani down, but didn't release him. Here's how this is going to work. Earth remains free. No invasions, no subjugation, no interference. And if I ever see one of your ships near my planet again, he bared his teeth, his elongated canines glinting. You'll wish you'd never crawled out of your hive. Rotapani's gaze was filled with a mix of rage and terror, but he nodded. Very well. Earth will remain independent. Kane released him, stepping back as the High Arbiter crumpled to the floor. Without another word, Kane turned and left the command center, his path unopposed. As he navigated the corridors back to his ship, he felt the hunger rising once more, its claws raking at his resolve. When he finally reached the docking bay, Kane paused to look back at the Moonrakers. He had saved Earth today, but the cost of his transformation loomed like a shadow over his thoughts. Earth will survive, he whispered to himself, even if it means becoming monsters to do it. He boarded his ship, his mind heavy but resolute, and set a course for home. For now, humanity was safe, and Kane would bear the burden of its survival, no matter the cost.